Our ambition as a national platform has always been to look beyond the obvious. Successful entrepreneurship and smart investing, yes, they require good ideas and a lot of money, but they also demand foresight, context, and the courage to act when the moment comes. We live in quite turbulent times, full of uncertainty, yes, but also full of opportunities, obviously. And sometimes when the noise gets too loud and the spotlight is fixed on Donald Trump, it's actually then when we need to step back, to reflect, to reframe, and to ask, what is really at stake? Switzerland's startup future is not just about innovation anymore. It might be about survival. Geopolitics will shape who's lead and who's left behind. That's why I'm very honored to introduce someone with a very rare perspective. Someone who's seen the front lines of global conflict and change. Please welcome General Sir Richard Barrons, former commander of the Joint Forces Command at the UK Armed Forces. He will show us how global power dynamics are reshaping technology, funding and strategy, and what Switzerland must do to survive or even to stay ahead. General Barrons, the floor is yours.
Let's go back there. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me say thank you so much for the opportunity for me to talk to a group like this this morning. And what a room this is. You can almost touch the ambition, the optimism, the fire for innovation. And I guess, therefore, some of you are likely to be a little surprised to see someone like me here, because the only thing I innovate in is the concentrated application of violence. And I have two objectives, therefore, this morning with this audience. The first is, 30 minutes from now, if I succeed, none of you will ever, for the rest of your lives, take for granted your security, your prosperity, and your ability to lead your lives according to the values you choose to adopt. Because they are at risk, and everyone in this room will have a part to play in protecting them. And the second thing, perhaps a bit more niche, is just perhaps in this room, there's the investor, the founder, the engineer, with a sense of innovation that will deliver the technology that will protect your security, your prosperity and values in this difficult digital age. And this is the journey I'm going to take you on. First of all, I'm going to remind you, and I hope I only am reminding you, that you live in a new era of state conflict. I'm going to describe to you that you're approaching that era of conflict on the fumes of what we once called the post-Cold War era, that lovely generation that is now long past. We're going to talk about the importance of deterrence and your part in it and what that means, and you're not ready for that. Then we're going to talk about how warfare in this age, and that is really about deterrence, is about innovation, and right now others are winning that competition. And then I'm going to implore you to fix this, and essentially I'm only presenting you with half a choice. You could now choose to get on the front foot and win this competition and do it in good time and in comfort and maybe make some money out of it. Or you could not do that, and then I think eventually you'll be smashed into it by events. So let's talk about this era of state conflict. It's not new. The world has had periods in its history where great powers and lesser powers have confronted each other. But we're in a new one now. We once lived in a world dominated by the US as the single superpower, and a world that largely went according to the rules-based international order, which people like us had largely designed and prospered by. And that's gone. So now we're in a world of multipolarity, where the risks of confrontation between states is potentially existential for everybody. But what has never happened before in the history of humankind is we've never had that sort of confrontation on a tableau of a combination of population growth and climate change, of nuclear proliferation, and the overwhelming effect of the digital age. That combination, unless managed well, it's not been managed well, is likely to be more than humankind of its own volition will manage thoughtfully and well. So we might try and do thoughtfully and well better. The third thing that makes this time really different is my entire life, until about February this year, had been dominated by the thought that if you're European, your security is underwritten by the US taxpayer, to the tune at today's prices of nearly $400 billion a year. We've known for 2 decades that that subsidy would decline, and it really is going to decline. The only issue now is the pace and the scale. And the point for you is the benchmark for security in this world is going up, and the subsidy we have benefited magnificently from, we should be grateful for, has gone down. We have to fill the gap thoughtfully. And finally, we're going to have a conversation about how much of your money you want to spend on deterrence. The conversation we tend to have, certainly in the UK, is the percentage of GDP. We're having an argument, should it be 3% of GDP or 3.5% of GDP? And that argument tends to be about making choices in public spending. But the other argument we need to have is if deterrence fails, and just look at Ukraine or Gaza, it's not 3% of GDP. The cost of fighting a war is conventionally between 1/4 and 1/2 of GDP, plus the destruction of the built environment, of lives and prospects of economy. In Ukraine, that bill is $500 billion already and rising. So let's talk about this legacy. The first thing is, during the post-Cold War, there wasn't really a risk, and so when you thought about war and conflict, it was just left to the uniformed professional military, people like me. And everyone thought that really wasn't their issue. And whilst you did that, because there was no threat, the armed forces everybody has got smaller, and the ammunition that they hold, the stocks that they have, the training they do, their readiness has declined. And it would be a miracle, wouldn't it, if the world we live in, where the demand for security and defense is up here, could be met by armed forces that were the product of another era. And that miracle, definitively, is not occurring in Europe. Because one of the things we have done, for very good reasons, is choose to spend our money on the things we really like, health and education, and if you're in the UK, filling in potholes becomes really important. And for most of us, that is at the limit of how much we want to tax ourselves and how much we can afford to borrow. And so now we're going to have a conversation about how we change that balance, a little less welfare for a bit more defense. And no one wants that conversation. And one of the answers to that conversation is the opportunity to innovate your way into a better balance. And there are a couple of other things that make this difficult. The first is, most of us in Europe, we're all about us, me, individuals, much less of a sense of a collective responsibility. For many people, they've acquired a sense that they're guaranteed prosperity and immunity from harm, and if something bad happens, the government will fix it. That does not work in the world that we now live in. And in addressing all of that, and I do mean you when I say this, there's no real politicians or officials or even military folk or in industry or innovators really understand the business of war and security because they never had to think about it. So there's no common lexicon, there's no common approach, there's no consensus around it. And we need to start here. We need to remind ourselves that in the whole history of humankind, the nature of war has never changed. It is a quite extraordinary aspect of the human condition. There are no rules, there are no safety nets, there are no boundaries. And you see this in yourselves when you get angry and you unlock your sense of self-restraint. So it's entirely possible that war is conducted for irrational reasons and continues long after it makes any sense because the red mist has descended. Just look at what's going on in the world today. That is the thing we have to avoid by doing deterrence well. But unless you understand the nature of war, you may find that some people, as lived experience recedes, become tempted by its alleged glamour or the way that it'll produce some systemic fix. And I promise you, that is never worth it. But there are many ways you can be hurt. So, first of all, let's acknowledge that war is always about a battle of wills. It's not always about territory. It's not credible, really, to think that there are powers out there today that want to invade Switzerland, attractive place though it clearly is, but they are interested in breaking your will to resist whatever it is they're trying to impose on you, whether that's a way of living or in terms of economics or it doesn't matter. And people like me are really good at working out how to hurt you essentially at two levels. Below the level of military confrontation, every single day, I can be in your cyberspace. I'm stealing your IPR. I'm stealing your money. I'm stealing your state secrets. I'm imposing disruption on your critical national infrastructure. I'm able to do contemporary things like interrupt your access to space-based capability. So what do you do if there is no GPS coming from the sky? Well, the answer is you'll get lost, and most of your critical infrastructure won't function. If you're the UK, your entire way of life depends on the cables and the pipelines that deliver information and energy. That's the way, and it doesn't involve me firing a shot, but that's the way to hurt. And the other aspect is, pretty sure everybody in this room has a smartphone. And if I can get in your phone, and I can, I can find out everything I need to know about who you really are, where you go, what you do, what you spend your money on, what you think, what you say to people. And thanks to the miracle of the AI you people are making, I can then directly message you millions of people at once with either the truth, information, unlikely, or misinformation or disinformation. In terms of confrontation and conflict in the 21st century, that is as powerful as a tactical nuclear weapon. And you make that technology, I just apply it. And then we have to reconsider above the threshold of military conflict, because we now live in an age where the technology that you make is changing how armies, navies, and air forces are thought about, constructed, and operated in the most profound way for 150 years. And that change is the result of the innovation that people like you make. I just apply it. So let's talk a bit about that. First of all, the world is transparent. You can see from space anything you really want to look at to the accuracy of a meter. And if I don't do that, I can find it in open source data, or I can just ask you. So there's no sneaking up on anybody now with armies, navies, and air forces. And the other side of that is, if I can see it, I can strike it with a precision missile, either a ballistic missile, goes through space, or a cruise missile, which is an aeroplane, to an accuracy of 2 meters at ranges of thousands of kilometers. Range is just a function of fuel navigation, and electronic protection. Which is why, in the world we live in, everybody is building what they'll call a digital kill web, where they will connect any sensor, from a smartphone to a military satellite, to any weapon, and that can be a hard kill, a missile, or a soft kill, a tweet, through a database which you make, based in secure cloud, which you operate, functioned by AI, which you develop. That's the future. So when we talk about AI, we are talking about the evolution of AI applying lethal force. Lethal force in a way that you can't keep up with if you want to stay safe. That's how you do cyber protection. That's how you do integrated air and missile defense. You're pretty comfortable with that. But also lethal force from AI that you can't keep up with nor understand what it's doing. And that's going to present some really interesting ethical choices, and will take you into an argument about the imperative for AI that you can trust. And then there is this other aspect, just as important, and all about innovation, which is, for people like me, if you wanted to ship a tank or an aircraft, you built one of those, and it required people to make it operate. But the advances you are making in autonomy and robotics and materials communications mean that now a sensor, radar, camera, or a weapon, missile, gun, no longer needs to be on something that has people on it. And every Army, Navy, Air Force will become a combination of things that are crewed, because they run the system, uncrewed things, which are operated by a person remotely, that's a drone, but increasingly autonomous platforms, which within the limits of their programming do what you have told them to do. You make all of that technology, the military just apply it. And that's where the scope for advantage and risk is. And a couple of things really matter here. The first is, all of this will in the end rest on a common digital spine, which is secure cloud operated by AI, delivering synthetic replications of your operating environment. I'll show you an example. Connected to connecting everything to everything. That's the any weapon, any sensor, any. No one's built that digital spine well yet. It's a massive opportunity and also a massive risk if you're second. But the key thing is this. In the Second World War, the military drove innovation. All sorts of things, and then it fell back into civil society. In the world we live in now, this global competition, and it is a competition, a quarter of all R&D people on the planet are in China, a quarter. In the world we live in now, staying safe, protecting your security, your prosperity, your values, depends on the innovation you make being connected to the business of defense and security, to armed forces, at the speed of innovation. Not the speed of preference, not the speed of your fiscal policy preferences, not the speed of antiquated acquisition mechanisms, which is the UK habit, at the speed of innovation. So that's why in this room, every one of you is essentially on the pitch. So, I want to leave you with these three watchwords. Integration. This world only works if you integrate industry with armed forces and agencies at the speed of innovation. That penny is dropping globally, and the opportunity for the Swiss innovation community is to apply your brilliance to be competitive and first and enduringly successful. But when you do that, since you're a relatively small country, you have to bear in mind a number of things are now going to become important. And the first of those is resilience. You've got to be able to take a blow because you can't fend them all off. In cyberspace and in the physical world, nationally, you're stronger than many nations at thinking about that. You have to recognize that you've got to mobilize from a place you are, normal life, to a place you don't want to be, which is when you're at war. The ability to mobilize what's in your head becomes profoundly important, whether that's in uniform or as industry. And you have to endure. The sorts of state-on-state confrontation I'm talking about, they run for years and they ebb and flow. They're not episodes or events. And the winners are the ones that can do the marathon, not exhausted after a 10-second sprint. So here's an example, I think. So this is a UK startup called Hadian. And they do synthetic replications of the of any operating model, city, country, it doesn't matter. So you know how to do this. You can replicate in the virtual world, the real world, the physical dimension. That's just everything that's built, the weather, infrastructure, food distribution, telecoms, it doesn't matter. It's just a question of aggregating the data that's already there. Then you can overlay on that the human geography. Some of that is census data, the things that don't change. And then there's the thing that changes all the time, which is the location of every person carrying a phone. Just import the network data and overlay it on the physical world. And the third thing you can do is you can track sentiment. So I know what people are thinking and saying and feeling. And so I can measure whether people are frightened, delighted, disappointed, whatever it is. So I can fuse the physical with the human geography, with sentiment. I can overlay on that what my problem is. It could be a flood, could be somebody else's armed forces, and my own assets. Could be ambulances, could be my military. And I can then distribute that so everybody who needs to is looking at the same real-time picture of the operating environment and can have a conversation about it. Now, I used to think that was quite clever. But then came generative AI. And what that is starting to mean, but only starting, is someone like me, I'm not a coder, amazingly, is I can tell the model to issue an instruction. I can say, move those assets from there to there, and the model then turns that into instruction, which is relayed to people on the ground who do the thing. And that's quite clever, because it means I don't have a big staff that's in the way of me making a decision and issuing an instruction. And that could be as military or police or government, it doesn't matter. But the really clever thing that's coming with generative AI is someone like me can interrogate that model and I can ask it to examine alternative futures. What happens if I do this? If I go, in the military terms, left flanking? What happens if I withdraw here? What happens if I attack in this way? Or, better, show me options to achieve this objective. Now, no one is doing that yet. Whoever does it first will have delivered the biggest leap forward in command and control, I think, for 200 years. And the only people who are capable of doing that innovation are people like you. It's not people like me. So, this is where I want to leave you. I've listed on this slide here the technologies that I think are most profoundly important to the military and defense and security for Europe, and most of you have a hand in that. The first of all is data. Nothing, you know this, nothing happens without data. Decide, make decisions, direct, understand what's going on, coordinate activity, and train and prepare in that synthetic environment I just described to you. So if you do data well in secure cloud, you understand sovereign data, you're getting an edge. Secondly, space. You have to assure access to space, and you have to be able to operate space-based communications, surveillance and reconnaissance, targeting, and you need to do two things. One is have the capability up there, and secondly, assure access to it. Mr. Musk and Starlink have had the most profound effect on how Ukraine fights its war, more profound than any military system. And none of that came from the military sector. Thirdly, cyber. You're probably quite good at your cyber resilience. Many people are not. I mean, look at the dramas that are occurring in Europe every single day, mostly on the criminal front. Big prizes for the technology driven by AI that assures the cyber resilience of states, institutions, enterprises, and citizens. And bigger prizes for those that operate in the very rarefied space of delivering offensive cyber capability. That is probably the key aspect of deterrence in the world we live in, that if your opponents or potential opponents know that you are so good at offensive cyber that should they threaten you, you will dismantle their daily life in ways they can't manage. And the skill to do that is in rooms like this. And then the kill web. All the constituent parts are listed there. Do you make sensors? Do you make the networks that connect sensors to the secure cloud AI-propelled database? Do you make the software that examines the data the sensors are delivering and makes a judgment about what to attack in what priority order? Or do you make the weapons, soft and hard, that can be applied in real time to the target? Now, let me give you an example of how that happens. In Gaza, it's a small place. A drone sees something, it relays it to a database, the AI prioritizes it, a human looks at it, a decision is made by the system recommending what should fire at it, and a weapon fires. That takes 7 seconds, and you can do it, and this is just as important, hundreds of times a day. In Ukraine, the same process is 2 minutes. That's a bigger place, 1,000-kilometer front line, much greater depth. In 15 years from now, that is a global issue. The great powers will have systems that can come to that judgment and act that quickly at global ranges. You can see the world, you can strike the world. Robotics and autonomy. This is the evolution of crewed, uncrewed, and autonomous. That is the race every armed force in the world will now embark on. It's an evolution over time. It's driven by advances in robotics and the ability to trust AI. Then, I won't dwell on this, the high-low miss still need bullets and shells if you make that, but missiles and drones, but cheaper ones and more reliable ones, and ones that you can mass produce. If you're in the electronic space, it's about stealth, signature management, and to be honest, if you fire a missile at a peer opponent, unless you have conditioned the electromagnetic spectrum it flies through, it never gets there now. So it's not just about making the missile, it's about dominating the electromagnetic spectrum. Who understands that? I hope some of you in this room do. And finally, the thing that's coming, if you're in pharmaceuticals, the good things that you do in producing individually targeted medicine and healthcare and pensions will be used by people like me to produce things like targeted pathogens that strike people with particular characteristics. You know how abhorrent that is, but it is the same science, and in a world of competing values, you're never going to rule that out just by regulation. So you've got to deal with it. It's quite scary stuff. And finally, I showed you that picture at the start, and I'm going to tell you what's wrong with it. Top left is a soldier with a rifle. He's somebody's child. Always need to remember that. Costs about £200,000 to raise a child in the UK, and I kill him with a bullet that costs £1. And when I do that, I shatter him, obviously, or her, and the family, and all his aspirations. So let's innovate that person out of harm's way. That takes you to robotics and autonomy. In the middle, ancient Puma helicopters, crew of 3, carry people, carry stuff. Where are the people who make the AI that can give me a rotorcraft that carries, first of all, stuff, and in due course, people? So I take the 3 people out of harm's way, and I reduce the training cost and the operating cost of my rotary platforms. Top right, infantry marching about. That comes from Waterloo in 1815. That just shows you that it's no good just giving people technology. You have to exploit the technology to change organization and method. So it's technology, organization, and method. And then when you do innovation, you're not about accessorization. You're about changing everything, the most profound change in militaries for 150 years. Bottom left, UK's aircraft carrier. That cost £3 billion. And the two F-35Bs that are landing are £100 million each. That's 1990s technology. I can destroy that aircraft carrier at 2,000 kilometers with a ballistic missile if I can see it. That's where China has taken the technology. But if I change what comes off that aircraft carrier, so not just F-35s, they're very good, but drones and missiles in boxes, then I can put the aircraft carrier somewhere in the middle of a big sea, harder to find, and still have an effect. That's innovation to continue getting value from things you've spent your money on. And then bottom right, a pilot. She's having a great day. She's really enjoying flying that airplane. But why is she in the sky? And why are the two aircraft with her also got people in them? That just means the aircraft is slower and more expensive and more vulnerable than a thing that's just a machine driven by AI. Every European country is going to think about investing in a sixth generation fighter jet, which will be optionally crewed. Everybody knows that's the last time we're going to do that. Billions and billions to be made from delivering the future of combat air without people in the sky. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope I've given you something to think about. Thank you very much for your attention, and I enjoy the rest of your day. I hope it's less threatening.